tonight's two main passions are cars and programming. His favorite company is Tesla because they take care of the environment. And one of his hobbies is photography. He has a knack to make anything look beautiful with his creative way of taking pictures. Now, we're all curious to know what he's going to talk about tonight. So let's hear it for Saika and Anna.
From a pretty popular fast food chain. Can anyone try and tell me how much this burger costs? You right there.
$1.
Yep, it costs $1. And it's a pretty good burger for $1. I don't know about you, but I really want to eat this burger right now. And it's not the healthiest food option out there. Looking at the buns alone, one harmful ingredient in this burger is enriched flour. Now, enriched flour is a bit of a misnomer. This sort of makes you feel like that this flour has somehow been made better. Yet through this enriching process, you lose a lot of ingredients and a big portion of the grain. And so this flour that starts off as wheat or grain ends up turning into pretty much starch. And then when they go through the bleaching process in order to make the bread have the white color that we're so used to now in bread, they lose even more nutrients. Yet there's still more harmful ingredients in just the buns alone. For example, these buns have high fructose corn syrup. And what high fructose corn syrup is, it's a man-made sweetener that's different from sugar in that it has a higher ratio of fructose to glucose. Well, what the key difference between this and sugar is that, in this case, the fructose and glucose are not chemically bound. And so the fructose goes straight to the liver, and you end up producing a lot of fat. And this, in turn, is linked to diseases like diabetes and dementia and other incurable ailments. So if these burgers are so unhealthy for you, why do we go through the effort of raising cows, slaughtering them for the meat in the burger? So let's look at the next layer of our burger. There's cheese. Now, the cheese and beef in our burger are both cattle products, yet dairy cows and beef cows lead fairly different lives. Now, what does the dairy industry want in a cow? They want cows that can produce as much milk as possible. And one way to do this is through inbreeding. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the concept where they go through generations and generations of cows in order to get cows that can produce as much milk as possible. Yet through this process, they make the gene pool very small, and it makes these cows very susceptible to diseases. One problem with the dairy industry is that here is a cow in a pasture. Now in the modern era, this process has been all but eradicated because of the push to industrialize everything to maximize profits and cut down on costs as much as possible. And so now, the cows are in these cramped, as you can see, like pretty much pens, and they're very dirty oftentimes, and this leads to a lot of disease. Yet one other problem with this is that these cows don't have very much room to lie down. And lying down is pretty important to cows. It's more important than social contact, and it's even more important than eating, as improbable as that sounds. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Imagine if you were deprived of sleep, then forced to wake up early and stand all day. It's fairly natural that you'd be a little cranky. And yet, with these cows, when they're forced to stand up all the time, they end up getting hoof lesions, and that is one leading cause of lameness. Now, in the dairy industry, lameness causes 20% of all cattle death. It is a leading cause of death in the dairy industry. The next leading cause of death is mastitis, which accounts for 16.5% of all cattle death. As you can tell by now, the dairy industry will basically stop at nothing in order to get cows that can produce as much milk as possible. The average cow is now forced to produce up to 20,000 gallons of milk a year. That's 10 times the amount of milk that would normally produce in order to sustain a normal calf. And so what happens is that they get mastitis, where the mammary glands swell up painfully. And even for the cows that don't get mastitis, in between sessions where they're hooked up to this dirty, unsanitary equipment in order to squeeze out as much milk as possible, they end up at any given point carrying up to 6.5 gallons of milk. That's 60 pounds of milk. Imagine having 60 pounds of dead weight just attached to your body. As you can imagine, walking becomes improbable, to say the least. But that's just the dairy cows. Moving on to beef cows. These beef cows and dairy cows have a lot of similar problems. There's a problem with inbreeding, where in this case, instead of trying to get as much milk as possible, they try to get cows to have the leanest amount of meat. And what's one way to get cows to have more meat? It's simple, you overfeed them. And so what some companies do is that they mix in high-quality hay with low-quality hay in order to make these cows eat a lot more than they should in order to get enough energy to sustain themselves. Now, this isn't without its own problems. So as a result of this overfeeding, 32% of beef cows end up getting chronic liver pain. And the remaining cows that don't end up having this get other ulcers and other stomach pain that's very painful and just pretty much unnecessary. Other problems in the beef and dairy industry is that they do stuff like dehorning, where they cut or burn off the horns of the cows, oftentimes without pain medication. And basically, all of this awful stuff happens to these cows, so up to the point where they pretty much cannot support their own weight and they collapse. But the abuse doesn't stop there. In order to get them to stand up again, many workers kick them, beat them, attach chains to them, drag them across the ground, or even shock them with electric poles. Now, it's worth mentioning at this point that 90% of these cases are preventable if measures were taken to avoid problems like lameness and mastitis and the small gene pool. And instead of taking measures to fix this problem with basically animal cruelty, it's far better off going to the root of the problem and perhaps giving them better flooring so that they can lie down, more room, better food, just in general, just improving their living conditions. But the problem of the burger does not stop there. It affects more than just the cow. It affects the world on a global scale. Going back to the bun. So this one bun emits approximately 1 pound of greenhouse gases. And those are conservative numbers. One man, who is the writer and founder of the blog Open the Future, has done some number crunching. And he's worked out that the average cheeseburger it produces 6.3 to 6.8 pounds of greenhouse gases. This burger itself is 4 ounces, and so that means this burger produces the equivalent weight of 30 cheeseburgers in carbon gases. Clearly, there's a problem here. And the average American eats 150 cheeseburgers a year. And if you add that all up, you'll find that the average American emits over 0.5 ton of greenhouse gases per year. And that's just one American. There are hundreds of millions of Americans in the world, and something as trivial as a cheeseburger can add up and cause serious problems in our world. And so really what I'm trying to say is that it's our responsibility to take care of the environment for our children and our children's children. It's our responsibility to put an end to animal cruelty. It's our responsibility to take care of our own bodies. Do you still want the burger?